Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing pretty good today. Thanks for asking. And we want to thank you all for tuning in. So today on the Voice of Yoga, we'll be talking about what is meant by the term thinking in this model. Listen as we expand upon the 3 modes of mortal thought, as written by Mary Baker Eddy in Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures from page 118. We will be talking about the mutable signs of the Zodiac as archetypes for these thinking functions. Learn more about how we think is what we become. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and experience unity consciousness. Swami, it seems like we have a lot on our table today, but let's start by what is human thinking and why should we forsake it?
Human thinking comes under the heading of our personal mentality, and it's our ability to form thoughts and opinions, concepts and beliefs, which is what we are accustomed to doing. But it's also completely dependent upon the testimony of our 5 senses, that we get all of our data comes through the input of our external environment, which is basically, as we have been talking about, is duality. It is the dimension of reality that is apart from spirit or unity. And so all of our human thinking really is an error. And it creates a hypnotic trance. And so we are in this false sense of existence, but we think it's real. But it's separate and apart from the truth of our being, which is that we are eternal spiritual beings.
So I see that you have entitled the show, Forsake Human Thinking for Divine Knowing. So that seems like that's going to be kind of a big leap, I think, for us to do. So how do you recommend we do that?
Well, the thing that I started to do, and we've been talking about it in these shows, is using the mutable signs to help us template the thinking process that goes on, starting with Gemini, which is basically the lower mind, and it's rooted in instinct, appetite, preservation, survival, need. And then moving on to Virgo, which is human intelligence, and it's the operation of our mental functions, perception, reason, memory, intuition, basically how we process the data that we get in through our 5 senses. And then Sagittarius is the higher mind, but it is more of the world mind. It is the collective consciousness, and it is compiled of all human thoughts and beliefs on a very collective level. And so trying to understand that all human thinking really comes from a dimension of reality or a part of reality or a part of consciousness that is divided, is in half. And then as we move into Pisces, which is associated with divine mind, and it is associated with spiritual sense, which is the absolute. So we really want to forsake the human thinking, which is really the rational, and move into divine mind or divine knowing, which is the absolute. And the thing about spirit, the thing about the absolute, it's not a mix of good and evil. That it is pure consciousness. It is absolute goodness. It is eternal life. So when we're forsaking the human, we're forsaking the mortal. And then by knowing the truth of our being, then we start to express the immortal.
So, Swami, what you just described to us, is that what we mean when we said in the opening of the show that we were going to discuss the 3 modes of mortal thought as written by Mary Baker Eddy in Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures?
Yeah, and that is also represented by the 2 beasts and the dragon in Revelations. That instinct, appetite, preservation, and survival would be the first beast. Human intelligence would be the second beast. The dragon is really the collective consciousness. It's the world mind. And in Revelations, the throne represents the will of the Father. It is divine mind, the absolute.
Now, I see in your notes here that you have some information by Herb Fitch that I imagine you probably want to share with our listeners.
Yeah, in one of his lectures, and I'll quote this here, that he says, the soul is expressing perfect divinity, translating it into light, which will move through you, outpicturing itself as form. You are in an infinite computer, and it is all you. We all have this built-in grace. This one grace functions as all. Now take another look at every defect that you think is in your life and recognize that it does not exist in divine consciousness, flowing through your soul into invisible patterns of divine idea. There is no place where a defect exists. But if there is one out there, or 2 or 3, something is happening in between, the invisible and the visible. The reality of you is without defect. The appearance of you, something in between has caused that distortion. That something in between is your consciousness. And so what he's saying here is that if we were to live out from an understanding of ourselves spiritually, if we were to sow to the spirit, and spirit became the outlet of our consciousness, then the form, what was being outpictured, would externalize as perfect creation. Because we are consumed or controlled by our human sense of thinking, then we start to distort the perfection of being. But it's very important to understand that that distortion does not affect God's creation. It only appears in our thought. And that's why the concept of the miracle can happen so spontaneously, so instantaneously, is because in reality, in the truth of our being, nothing ever really changes. That the only thing that changes is our perception of what it is that is appearing before us. And so the main thing that we want to start to do is we want to start to forsake the testimony of our 5 senses and then start to recognize the presence of this divine law that is readily available to us. And by us recognizing it, basically what we do is we stop thinking humanly. We stop processing the data that is coming in through our senses. And we move our mind into its rightful position as an avenue of awareness for the presence of spirit, for the presence of the truth of our being. And that will begin to outpicture the perfection of our being, as opposed to what most of us do is we try and do this humanly. And especially one of her papers, Mary Baker Eddy, talks about this. And in fact, I'll get that for you. In the Body, which was written January 19th, 1886, Mary Baker Eddy says, and I'll quote from here, "It seemed a wonderful thing when advanced thinkers began to perceive certain mental laws and to apply them to the healing of the body. This mental teaching is that man is the builder or creator of his body, that he builds or forms his body through his own thought, that he can change his body by his thought, and therefore that if he has built a sick body by wrong thinking or ignorant thinking, he can build a well body by right thinking. That by his ignorant, inharmonious thought, he prevents God from manifesting, and by his true and harmonious thought, he brings God into manifestation." Of course, this is a great advance over the old drug system, but it doesn't go far enough to satisfy the one who wishes the whole truth and nothing but the truth. It makes the body a battleground for opposing and contending forces. Wrong thinking tearing down, right thinking building up, wrong thinking creating disease, right thinking destroying disease and bringing in healthy conditions. For this teaching deals only with the changing conditions of the personal mentality, and not with the changeless state of being, the changeless mind, the omnipresence. It is better than the old way, but it is a hard way, a way of constant battle between good and evil, of hard work and doubtful results, because it deals with two powers instead of one. And that's the end of the quote, but I really think that she captures the whole thing about why in the Bible it says, "Take no thought for thine own self," and that the term repent in the Bible doesn't mean plead for forgiveness. It really means to think differently.
And she does mention at the very end, you had said it deals with two powers instead of one. Now here she is talking about mortal thinking and divine thinking.
Well, mortal thinking is the belief in two powers, duality. Divine thinking is the belief in one power. And the difference between the two is that human thinking works on contrast, and it works in the realm of duality, whereas divine mind sees only the absolute. It deals in terms of wholeness. It doesn't have a divided consciousness.
So in the quote that you recited from Mary Baker Eddy, you had recited the line that this is a great advance over the old drug system, but it does not go far enough to satisfy the one who wishes whole truth and nothing but the truth. So that I assume would be God, would be spirit. But what I find interesting as well is she talks about the old drug system, and as you said, this was written back in 1886. I mean, way before drugs are what they are right now. So I think she really saw or could foresee what was going to happen in the future.
Yeah, she is so far ahead of her time. In fact, most of the discoveries that are coming up in quantum physics with observation having effect on reality, and the observer sets the measurement for the collapse of the wave function. Our Western sciences haven't even caught up with what she's talking about because they don't understand the three modes of mortal thinking and the function of divine mind in the human experience.
Well, this is a good place to pause to hear a word from our sponsors. So listeners, we'll return with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 1, Human Development and the 8 Essential Stages of Kriya Yoga. This program is a comprehensive course that will help you get your arms around the science of Kriya Yoga. It provides a clear understanding of the goals and objectives behind yoga, along with the physics of spirituality. It includes the practices, supportive concepts of Kriya Yoga, and the process in human development, apotheosis, the process of the human becoming divine. A complete guide on how to become a human in the adult state. Get the light in your soul and experience the simplicity and joy of union with the divine. This course is available in live classes at the ashram or online with 8 videos or 4 CDs. Visit our website, www.ipdtransform.com, for more information. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, before we move on, I want to ask you a question again about the quote that you had recited from Mary Baker Eddy, when she talks about right thinking, building up, and whatever that quote was. And it got me to thinking about when people are having a discord and they turn to visualization or anything like that to try to change their body. I wanted to get your thoughts on that and why, again, does that not work?
Well, to answer your question, it's not that it doesn't work. It works on a karmic level. We can use world mind. We could use positive thinking to change finite bad to finite good. But like Mary Baker Eddy said in her paper, for those that want to know the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, then positive thinking, working with the changing conditions of our personal mentality, doesn't go deep enough. So a big distinction between what most of us are doing with our human thinking and trying to manage conditions and trying to maybe have a better human experience, what we're missing out on are the benefits that come with spiritual understanding, with the truth of our being. And it's very different when you're living out from the world and the world mind as opposed to when you're living out from spirit, from spiritual identity, from the perfection of our being.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, well, why would anybody who has some type of a discomfort in their body, if they could heal it through mental means or energetic means, through Reiki or what have you, what would be the reason for them to want to heal themselves spiritually? And not only that, but can it be something that's instantaneous?
Well, to answer your question, it can always be instantaneous because the truth of our being is always there. The presence of divine law is always there. What changes is our perception of it. All the change takes place in individual consciousness. And so human thinking is everything taken from the outer 5 senses to the inner 5 senses that originates from duality, matter and mind. Divine knowing is everything given from the inner 5 senses to the outer 5 senses, which originates in unity or spiritual self. So the big change here really becomes the exchange of energy. What is it? Do I sow to the flesh or do I sow to the spirit? And why would I want to sow to the flesh if I knew that I could get a much better return? To heal a condition, to change bad health to good health, has merit, but you are still going to expire. You are still finite and you are a mortal corporeal being. But to change the mortal to immortal, eternal life, to me, that's the upgrade. That spiritual identity has no beginning and no ending. Spiritual identity is the changeless state of being that she was talking about.
And then that's what you mean when you talk about divine knowing, is knowing that we are the changeless state of being.
Right. Knowing the truth of our being. That's what it says in the Bible. To know the truth, and it will make us free. Now, it makes us free from, first of all, the belief that we are material, corporeal, finite, mortal, and it frees us from the law of karma, which is what governs that level of consciousness, and it opens us up to the divine law of life, that we are the expression of an indestructible principle, which is the changeless state of being.
Now, you had mentioned earlier from the Bible where it says, take no thought for thyself. So if we do try to use mortal means, say visualization to try to heal ourselves or Reiki or anything like that, we are, in effect, taking thought for ourselves.
Right. And Paul tells us that our sufficiency to think is not of ourselves, but our sufficiency to think is of God. And so those three modes of thinking, three modes of mortal thinking, Gemini, Virgo, and Sagittarius, that all comes under taking thought for ourselves. There is typically a me and involved in that type of thinking. And we come from a place of many minds. But to think with God as God, that is Pisces. And there's only one mind. There is only one life. There is only one truth. And to know that to be the truth of your being is what changes everything for us. That's what they mean by our sufficiency. To think is of God. To make your mind an avenue of awareness for the presence of this absolute, invisible, intangible source, resource.
Let me give you an example. So just so we can get clarification and understanding, if I have a pain in my big toe, so what I want to avoid is concentrating. So what I want to do is not concentrate on that pain or discomfort. I need to turn my mind over to spirit, or do I just don't do anything at all and try to realize the fact that I am spirit and therefore I am already perfect, so therefore I don't have the pain in my big toe?
I think what you're trying to say is that there's a big difference between fake it until you make it, where in this model you really want to mind it till you find it. To know the truth about your being means that the soul is expressing perfect divinity, translating into light, which will move through you, outpicturing itself as form. Divine consciousness flowing through your soul into invisible patterns of divine idea. There is no place there where a defect exists, as Herb Fitch told us in that first quote. Now, once we know that to be the truth of our being, once we know that divine law is the only power in this universe, then anything that doesn't have the qualities of the divine, the perfection of being, perfect health, perfect harmony, perfect peace. Now, to know that divine reality is perfect, and to know that it is the only thing that is backed by the principle or the law of this universe, then for us to accept anything that does not have these qualities is really a violation of divine law. And what happens with that is then we actually believe in the discord. We believe in the pain. I have a pain in my back. And so thinking is what makes it so. But it doesn't make it so in reality. It just makes it so in your mind. And then, of course, it outpictures as a condition in the appearance of what you think is your body. Now, once we start to forsake this human thinking for this divine knowing, not just academically, not just reciting the words, but to know the truth, then you start to change the external appearance. You actually change the appearance of a particular condition.
I like what you said from his quote, where the reality of you is without defect. The appearance of you may be with defect, and that's what it is that I think most of us are dealing with.
Right, and that's all part of the testimony of our senses, that we start with the physical body. We go to the doctor because we have a pain. The doctor examines the body. Now, to do it spiritually is to know the truth. Whatever God created is perfect. And if you sow to the flesh, then you're under the law of karma. You have a belief in two powers, and you can start to work with mental means or material means to try and correct your condition, but it's going to be an ongoing, ever-ending, never-ending struggle. You're in the cycle of death and rebirth. Even if you can fix the pain in your back, you're still going to expire. But if you can sow to the spirit and you can actually change your identity by knowing the truth that you are an eternal spiritual being, you are the expression of an indestructible principle, then you are living out of the truth of your being, and that will also correct your condition, but it will do it in a way that the condition rises above the expiration. You move out of mortality into immortality. You move out of the changing conditions of your personal mentality into the changeless state of being.
So I think what you're saying is that we have to put ourselves in a position where we can conduct this ceaseless prayer for spirit. So in order for us to do that, how do you recommend that we do something like that? How do we even make that happen in our everyday life?
Well, it's just in recognition, it's awareness. In the Yoga Sutras, they talk about constant practice of detachment, continuous control of the thought variations. And the best way to do it is the way Jesus told us, is to love the Lord thy God with your heart, your soul, and your mind. To know the truth of your being, to know the presence of what is God. Now, where it's going to fail is that you will mistake the impermanent for the permanent. You will identify with your concept of God, with the beast, the first beast, the second beast, or the dragon. And you'll still be under the law of karma, and it won't seem like it's working for you. But once you know this concept of God aright, once you know the truth of your being, and now you desire it and you long for it, then of course now you are sowing to the spirit. And when you do that, it will outpicture the perfection of your being.
Oh, great information. Thank you, Swami. So I think we need to start wrapping up our program for this morning. So listeners, be sure to visit our website, www.ipdtransform.com, and lots of tools on that website to continue your learning experiences. And don't forget, you can also access Swami's free webinars that he does every Wednesday at noon. So, Swami, do you have any final thoughts or comments about today's program?
Well, I would like to encourage everybody to stop thinking, or to think with no mind, or think with divine mind, or as the Buddha said, to desire nothing. And with that, I'll wish everybody a good day. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.